What's up? It's Debbie. I am back with more True Crimes of Criminal Minds. And today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 12, What Fresh Hell. And the true crime case that we're covering is the abduction of 12-year-old Polly Klaas. What Fresh Hell is about the abduction of 11-year-old Billy Copeland. As the show starts, Billy and her mother are at soccer practice. Her mother is the coach. She has a broken arm, so she's not playing, but she's standing on the sidelines with her mother, and they're arguing because she wants to go visit her dad. And her mom says, of course you do. He doesn't make you do anything. She says something smart alecky to her, and she says, you have a bad attitude, Billy, run it off. And she makes Billy run laps. And while she is running laps, a man comes up to her. He has a leash, and he says, can you help me find my dog, Candy? The next thing we see is a green SUV fleeing the park with Billy in the back seat, banging on the windows, trying to get someone's attention to help her. Since nobody was around when she was abducted, and she had been arguing and wanted to go see her dad, everyone thought that her dad may have been the one that abducted her. So they've called every number they have for him. They've gone to his work. They've gone to his house. They can't find him anywhere. So the BAU is called in because they can't find the dad. They don't know if they should keep on him to see if he's a suspect or move on to other things. So they call in the BAU. So when the dad shows up, Gideon presses him about, where were you? Why weren't you here? Why wasn't your phone on?
He's been missing since yesterday. What the hell have you people been doing since then?
Where have you been, Mr. Copeland?
Me?
Where were you all day and all night?
I have a cabin in Brandywine Valley.
Billy tried your cell phone yesterday afternoon.
Well, I shut it off sometimes. I like the solitude.
And you didn't fight your wife for custody of your daughter.
I want her to grow up in her home, with her friends around. This is the only place she's ever lived.
So you love her very much?
Yes.
Why are you wasting the precious time we have left? You weren't at your cabin.
And he makes up all kinds of excuses as to why they were not able to reach him. And eventually he tells the truth. And the truth is that the cancer is back and he's sick again and he was in the hospital. Which I don't know why he didn't just own up to that. I mean, his daughters are missing. Why is it such a secret that he's sick again? I don't understand why he felt like he needed to hide that. And he said it was in his lymph nodes and there was nothing else they could do. So, there's a lady in the neighborhood that is obsessed with registered sex offenders. And Morgan goes to talk to a group of kids that are playing in the neighborhood. And this mother is very forceful and very disruptive. And he's like, ma'am, I just need to ask the kids some questions. And one little girl said that someone had come up to her in the park with a dog leash wanting to look for his dog Candy. But she didn't have time. She had to go home. So he did not abduct her. Instead, he abducted Billy. They decided when they did the profile that this perpetrator actually at one time had a dog named Candy, maybe, but definitely had a dog. Because he lived in the neighborhood. If he were going to try to abduct some child that lived in the neighborhood, they would know that he actually did have a dog named Candy. However, his dog died 6 months previously. It had not run away. But the kids that lived in the neighborhood may have remembered that this man had the dog named Candy. So they used that information to try to find the abductor. While they're trying to set up a press conference, somebody comes to the door. Mr. Copeland goes out and speaks with this woman and then runs like a bat out of hell. And Elle overheard what happened, told the lady she was stupid, and then called Hotch and said, we have a problem. So Morgan and Hotch get there. He went after this man on the sex offender registry with a wrench. And Morgan tackles him, pulls him off the guy, and Mr. Copeland's like, well, he's got my daughter, and they're like, no, he doesn't. There are a lot of ways to get on that list. He was on the list propositioning a prostitute. Had nothing to do with children. So they bring Mr. Copeland back home. They tell them, we need you guys to do this press conference. And we need you to say that we are looking for a witness. They had recalled the Amber Alert. They got the cops out of the neighborhood. They were trying to make the abductor feel comfortable to think he had gotten away with it. And in the press conference, the parents were to ask for Billy's return. And they were told that a man is a possible witness, that it had been erroneously reported that he was a suspect. Now they just think he was a witness, and he was in a green SUV, and he had a dog, a golden retriever named Candy. At the end of the press conference, a news person stands up and says, what about the body that they found? And the parents freak out. No one has said anything about a body being found. Gideon and Reed had gone to look at the body. JJ chewed out the reporter that was rude enough and unprofessional enough to ask this horrible question to these people, and they lost it. So then Gideon gets back and there's chaos, and he's like, what happened? And they said, the reporter asked him about the body, and he's like, it wasn't her. I saw the body. It was too old to be Billy. It's not Billy. And so the parents calm down a little bit. They do get a call from a neighbor that believes he knows the witness that they talked about in the press conference. He says he's a neighbor. He's always outside working in the yard every day. I work in my yard, and we're always talking about our grass because he doesn't have any crabgrass. He has a green SUV, and he used to have a dog named Candy, a golden retriever that died 6 months ago. So then they're standing around thinking, okay, we have the information, we have the house, and we know it's most likely that she is in there. But they don't have a search warrant yet. So Gideon just flies into the house, starts looking for evidence. Hotch questions the man, who denies everything. And Hotch was like, Gideon, this is bad. We don't have a search warrant. All we found is some child pornography. There's no sign of Billy or that Billy's ever been in this house. So Gideon's sitting there, and he notices a broom in the corner and notices that it has some insulation on it. She's in the attic. So one of the sources that I read said it was a vent that he unscrewed in the ceiling. I thought it was just a ceiling tile, what I remember from watching the episode, but it doesn't really matter. She was in the attic, and he found a way to get to her with the broom and saved her and brought her back to her parents. One of the rare cases that does not have a sad ending. So that is What Fresh Hell, Season 1, Episode 12. Now we're going to talk about the abduction of 12-year-old Polly Klaas. On October 1st, 1993, Polly Klaas was having a sleepover with two of her friends. Their names were Kate and Jillian. Polly and Jillian had walked to the store to get some popsicles, and then they waited for Kate to show up. Katie arrived about 8:30, and they were in Polly's bedroom trying on Halloween costumes. Polly's mother had a migraine. She asked the girls to please keep it down, They quieted down, and she took some sleeping pills and said she was going to bed. Thomas and some of his friends, a boy in the neighborhood, went to the video game store around 9 o'clock and saw someone loitering around Polly's house. They went to the video store, came back 20 minutes later, and the guy was still outside the house. The neighbor behind Polly also saw a strange man on the back porch, not going in the door, just standing there. Nobody called the police. Nobody called the house to warn them that there was a strange man outside their house. But these were people that lived in the neighborhood and would have recognized if it was somebody else from the neighborhood. So this was a stranger. So a little after 10 o'clock, a man walks into Polly's bedroom with a knife. He has a bag that has strips of cloth in it that he tied the girls up with. He also cut a strap of a purse and the cord off of a Super Nintendo and used those to tie up the girls as well. He got pillowcases from the bed and covered their heads, and he told the girls to lay down and count to 1,000. He said that Polly was going with him to show him where the valuables were. He was just there to rob them, and he wasn't going to hurt anyone. So they were told to count to 1,000, and by the time they were done, Polly would be back. Well, Polly never came back. So around 11:30, the girls had worked themselves free, and they went in and they told Polly's mom what had happened and that Polly was gone. The FBI was called in, and they said there was a pitiful amount of evidence, meaning not enough evidence. There was a rug on the floor that they took. They weren't sure why they took it. They just felt like they needed to take it and examine the rug. They found things that the regular police did not find because they did not have the better equipment that the FBI does. So there were a bunch of fingerprints found in the room that were all confirmed to be family or friends. But there was one partial palm print on, it says a crossbar of the bed. I don't know if that is like a poster bed. But anyway, what they said was it was like if you were leaning in to pick something up and you put your hand to brace yourself so you don't fall over when you're reaching. And they think that he might have done that when he got the pillowcases off the bed to put over the girls' heads. So they had that. They had some carpet fibers from a vehicle, and none of the parents or friends that had been in that house, it did not match any of their cars. So we have foreign car carpet fibers and a partial palm print. On the rug that they didn't know why they were taking, they actually found a hair with the root still attached. So now they're getting some clues. Unfortunately, they're not getting any matches. You have to have someone to match it with. If you just have DNA with no one to match it with, it doesn't matter that you have the DNA. And at the time, APHIS, which is the fingerprint database, only had fingerprints. They didn't have palm prints. They didn't have any other kind of prints but fingerprints. So there was no match to the palm print either. They searched and searched and searched for this child. They searched 1,000-mile area on foot. You need 3,000-mile area from the sky. And there were press conferences. There were flyers. There was a call center set up to receive the calls from the people that had seen the flyers. Flyers were mailed to a bunch of houses in the vicinity. This is the first case that spread on the internet. And as we're seeing now, these cases are wildfire on the internet. The Valo Daybell one, the Gabby Petito one, Sherry Papini, like all of these are all over the internet now. As soon as they happen, this was the very first. So they set up a website with the call number and the specifics of Polly, she's 4'9", brown hair, brown eyes, what she was wearing, and they tried to use the internet to find her, as well as people in the community, and people voluntarily helped search for this girl. There was a manhunt for this child, and there was no trace of her. Winona Ryder grew up in Petaluma, California, where Polly lived. So she donated $200,000 for a reward to anybody that could find out who had abducted her. And Winona Ryder dedicated the movie she was in, Little Women, to Polly Klaas's memory, because Little Women was Polly's favorite book. So sad. Polly's picture on the internet spread to over 20 million people. They faxed thousands of the flyers to supermarkets and truck stops. So her image was everywhere, and she became known as America's Child. Everybody in America was focused on this case and where this child had gone. 2 days after the abduction, her dad got a call that sounded like Polly, and it said she was at a hotel and her abductor was in the other room, and then the line went dead, like the abductor had come in and caught her on the phone. Well, they traced the call, they went to the house. It was just a normal family house. A teenage girl had hoaxed the call on a dare from some friends. 60,000 calls came in to the tip hotline, and 12,000 leads were investigated. They brought in a new sketch artist because the original sketch artist that Kate and Jillian had talked to, they were still kind of in shock and traumatized, and they didn't remember things as well. So they brought a new sketch artist in that had a reputation for calming down the people to help them to remember more, so that when she drew it, it was a more accurate. After the more accurate sketch was drawn, they redid the flyers with the better sketch on it. Thomas, one of the boys that had been going to the video store, and his friend Sean looked at the new sketch, and they also agreed that that was the man that they saw outside of Polly's house. That same night, a little later, Dana Jaffe was at work, and her babysitter was at home with her daughter. She lived way back on an isolated area of land, and there was a long, winding driveway to her house. So she came home, relieved the babysitter. The babysitter left. On the way out, she saw a man with a car that was stuck on the side of the road. The man was out in the road trying to get her to stop. And the man said, "My car is stuck. Can you help me?" And he asked the babysitter what was further up the road. And she just felt totally uncomfortable when she saw this man. And she told him no, she couldn't help him. And then she drove to town. This was back in the 90s. There weren't a lot of cell phones. She drove to town to find a payphone to call her friend Dana and tell her, "There's a weird guy out here on your property." So Dana grabbed her daughter, grabbed a baseball bat, got in her car, and drove to town to call the police. And as she passed the car, she did not see a man, just the car. Which makes me wonder, on her way in, did she not see a car? Was there not anybody there? There had to be some time between her getting home and the babysitter leaving. Like, I don't know, maybe they just chit-chatted for a while or whatever, to give the guy time enough to get there. She called the police, and the cops came out, and they asked the guy, "What are you doing here?" And he was drunk. He had a 6-pack of beer in the car, and he took one out and proceeded to drink it in front of the policeman. And they said, no, let's pour that out. You're going to be driving. And he was disheveled, sweaty, and he had twigs and branches in his hair. He was dirty, and they said, why are you sweating? Why are you so disheveled? And he said, well, I'm trying to get branches and leaves and stuff to put under the car to give it some traction so I can get it out. So the cops look under the car. There's no branches, there's no leaves, there's no nothing under the car. So he obviously is lying because there's nothing there that he said was there. So they realize he's drunk. They give him sobriety tests. He passes every single sobriety test that they give him. I guess they didn't have a breathalyzer machine with them, because if he was drunk, he would have blown the machine and they would have known that they could detain him. But apparently they only have the sobriety tests. So because he passed all the tests, they had to let him go. They called a tow truck for him, and a tow truck came out, pulled his car out, and they escorted him to the highway, and he went on his way. When they asked him why he was there, he said he was there to look at the view. By now it's like midnight. He busted into Polly's room at 10 p.m. So this is a couple hours later, and he stopped to look at the view in the pitch dark, isolated area. They ran his driver's license, and there were no outstanding warrants on the license, no traffic violations, no parking tickets, nothing like that. He came up clean, so they just let him go. This man's name was Richard Allen Davis. Richard Allen Davis was born on June 2nd, 1945 in San Francisco, California. He was the third of 5 children, and his parents divorced when he was young. But his dad got custody because his mother did immoral acts in front of the children. And nothing was more specific than that. So I don't know what exactly she did in front of them, but apparently whatever it was inappropriate. So the dad got custody, but the kids got back and forth between mom and dad, and to grandparents, and to aunts and uncles, and to friends of the family. They were just bounced around, boop, 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 all over the place, because nobody wanted to take care of these children. Their dad was mentally unstable, and he would shoot at hallucinations outside. He would go outside and with a gun and just shoot at all these hallucinations that he was seeing. Richard Allen Davis had a history of hurting animals from childhood. And he said that he stole things to relieve tension. I don't see how that relieves tension. That would make me more tense if I was breaking into people's homes and stealing their stuff, and I'd be afraid I'd get caught. That would make me more tense, but apparently for him, it was a tension reliever. So that was why he stole things. At least that's what he said. That was why he stole things. So at 17 years old, a judge gave him the choice of a youth facility or the service, and he picked the service. So he was stationed in Germany in the army, and he continued to steal. And 13 months after joining, he was given a dishonorable discharge. On October 12, 1973, he was at his girlfriend's house, Marlene Voris. And while they were having a party, she supposedly committed suicide. There were 7 suicide notes found around the house, but some people said that Richard Allen Davis had shot her. And Richard Allen Davis said that he almost witnessed it himself and that he was messed up by it. But other people that were at the party claimed that he did it. And I don't know why he was not arrested for that, but apparently not. A little while later, he was arrested for pawning stolen goods, and he said his motive for stealing that time was because he was hungry. When he was 21, he was arrested for burglary. He could have gotten 6 months to 15 years, but he only served a year of his sentence. In 1983, he tried to kidnap a woman from a parking lot at Knife Point, and there just happened to be a cop nearby that was able to arrest him and save the woman. He tried to kill himself in prison, and he was sent to a mental hospital. He escaped from the mental hospital and was on the run for 5 days. A huge crime spree of burglary and breaking and entering for 5 days after he escaped from the mental hospital. He was sentenced to 16 years, but only served 8 of those 16 years due to overcrowding. He was let go with just 50% of his sentence. 2 months after the abduction, Jaffe finds something on her property and she calls the police. On her property, in a small clearing, she found strips of cloth, a satiny, silky, they said it was like pajama material, so I'm assuming satiny, material that was made into a mask, and there were a pair of tights that was knotted, and there was hair in the knot. There was human hair in the knot. So Dana Jaffe called the police, and this was their first real lead, because they still have not made a connection between Richard Allen Davis, the man that was there that night, and Polly, because there was no sign of Polly. He passed the sobriety test, so they just let him go. So it was late at night, it was foggy, it was wet and rainy, and there was a manhunt in all this messy weather, even with dogs, to try to find Polly. And this is 2 months, almost 2 months. It's November 28th. She was abducted on October 1st. This is November 28th, so almost 2 months later, and they're looking for her on the property where they found Richard Allen Davis that night. Richard Allen Davis's mom lived in Petaluma. His sister also lived nearby, and they tracked him to his sister's home, and he was not there, but they did a stakeout. And when he showed up, he was in a van. They arrested him for parole violations. He was on parole for trying to abduct that woman, and he had an outstanding warrant for a parole violation. So that's what they arrested him on. They still had no evidence that he was the person that abducted Polly. But now that they have him in custody, they can check his DNA, they can get his fingerprints. Now they have a good lead and a suspect to try to match, to see if they match to the abduction. All the evidence was flown to the FBI lab at Quantico, and there were strips of material found at that area of Dana Jaffe's property, and also in Polly Klaas's bedroom. And the FBI was able to line them up and put them together like a puzzle piece, and they matched identically. So that is the first connection of Richard Allen Davis being on that property, and then it being related to Polly Klaas's abduction. He denied doing any of it, and they were able to match the palm print found in Polly's bedroom to him. But he is in jail, and he does not know this yet. So a friend of his goes to the jail to visit him, and he tells Richard Allen Davis, you know, they have your palm print, right? And he did not. He was not aware. So the detective in charge of the case was paged to go to the jail. So he went to the jail, and by this time he had built up a rapport with Richard Allen Davis. He was very cordial and friendly when he arrested him, and Richard would talk to him. So Richard confesses and tells him all about how he kidnapped Polly Klaas. Davis lived in a halfway house because he was on parole, and he got like an overnight pass to go visit his mother. Well, he was drunk, and it was late, and it was dark, and he couldn't find her house. So he just drove around. He went and bought some drugs, bought some beer, and was just roaming around until he found a house that he felt like he wanted to burglarize. And that house happened to belong to Polly Klaas. He crawled through an open window. He had a duffel bag that had bindings and tape and those sort of things in them. And he does not remember, after climbing in the window, he says he remembers nothing else until he came to, and he was driving his car, and he looked over and there was a little girl in the car with him. So he says he does not remember anything about the actual abduction. But after the cops found him stuck on the side of the road, and they got the tow truck to pull him out, and they escorted him back to the highway, he said he waited about 15 minutes and went back because he had hidden Polly up a very steep embankment. So that was probably how he got the twigs and leaves and stuff in his hair, and why he was hot and sweaty, because he had carried her up that embankment and left her there. What I want to know is, why didn't she run away? Did she just sit there and wait for him? But some people believe she was already dead at that point. So maybe she was already dead and he carried her up the embankment to hide her, and then later came back to get her to dispose of her elsewhere. He did remember where he left her body, and he led the police to an old lumber mill, and where her body was under, he had put her under a bunch of boards, and that was where they found her. She was found on December 4th, and she had been strangled. There was semen on her body, but there was no sign of SA. He denied that he had SA'd her because he knew he would not fare well in prison if the prisoners knew that he had done that to a child. So he totally denied that. He was charged with murder with special circumstances, burglary, robbing, kidnapping, and lewd acts with a child. He was found guilty. And at his sentencing hearing, he said that he did not SA her because she said to him, "Please don't do me like my daddy does." And her dad was in the courtroom, and he lost it. He lunged at Davis, and he was removed from the courtroom by bailiffs. You know, that would tick me off too. This man has taken the life of my child, and now he's telling me that she said these horrible things about me. No. So I don't blame the dad for being mad. Not at all. And the judge told Davis, he said, death penalty cases are really hard for judges. It's a really hard decision that a judge has to make to put someone to death. But he said in his case, he made it so easy for him to come to that conclusion. He has been attacked by other inmates. He's tried to OD. It has not been a pleasant experience. I mean, of course not, but he's had it worse than most. And he is now kept in solitary confinement because everybody wants to kill him. It's a very sad case, but 3 good things came out of it. Now, APHIS has palm prints as well as fingerprints in their database. When a cop stops, even for a routine traffic stop, and they run a driver's license now, they get a criminal history, not just speeding tickets, but an actual criminal history, and they can see if there's warrants out for them, if they need to arrest them for something else. And this also led to the 3-strike rule, because if Richard Allen Davis already tried this before, and he had been arrested, if he had not been let out of prison, Polly Klaas would still be alive today. So it led to the 3-strike rule. 3 strikes and you're out. You do 3 crimes and that's it. No more second chances. You're in prison for the rest of your life. So that's it for the Polly Klaas case. And it's very sad, and I feel for those parents. And I just think that we need some kind of prison reform that keeps these monsters locked up. There are so many cases that if they had just stayed in jail, they wouldn't have happened. And this is one of those, and it's very sad. So stay to the end to see what's happening next week, and subscribe so you can be entered into the giveaway. Share, like, hit the bell for notifications. I have a new crime serial killer book. I got this at Books A Million the other day. And I don't know, I might raffle this one off as well. I don't know. We'll have to see how this first one goes. I'm up to 20 subscribers now, guys. Thank you. But 93% of you that watch my videos are not subscribed. So, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye.